My name is Selena Ward. I was 23 when my world cracked open, just days before my graduate thesis was due. 18 months of sleepless nights and stubborn perseverance were reduced to splintered fragments the moment my father brought my laptop crashing against the side of my head. I remember the sound first, plastic splitting, bone reverberating, then the warmth of blood trailing down my temple like ink smearing across a page. My mother stood nearby, her laughter light and cruel, as though she had been waiting for this spectacle. "You don't deserve a future," my father snarled. "You're nothing but a parasite." I grew up in Darnell, a cramped industrial town where the factory whistle marked the rhythm of life more faithfully than the clock tower downtown. Our two-bedroom house, perpetually shedding its paint, was my father's reminder of what he called realistic priorities. To him, the world was simple. Men worked with their hands, women endured, and dreams were luxuries no one could afford. He spent 26 years at the foundry, his calloused palms and weather-worn face bearing the evidence. He despised education, mocking it as softness. My mother, quiet, brittle, conditioned into obedience, followed his script without deviation. If silence didn't protect her, then laughter at my expense did. My brother Damon was the golden child. He had dropped out of school early to work beside my father. "That's my son," Dad would declare proudly, gripping Damon's shoulder, not wasting time with books. Damon soaked up every word, every gesture, every grim smirk. At 20, he already had his own small apartment and a paycheck that made him the family hero. And then there was me. I wanted more. Words, numbers, and experiments were my world. They made sense when nothing else did. But in our house, wanting more was a sin. My fascination with learning began when I was small. I used to conduct makeshift science experiments in the kitchen until my father stormed in, furious at my wasting food. In 3rd grade, my teacher, Mrs. Harlow, told my parents during a conference, "Selena has remarkable analytical skills. She's destined for something greater." My father stared past her at the wall. My mother nodded politely, already forgetting the words before we reached the car. By 5th grade, I had won the district spelling bee. The local paper published my photo, my smile beaming as I clutched the certificate. Other kids' parents celebrated, snapping pictures, embracing their children. Mine never came. Dad said he had to work overtime. Later I overheard him telling Damon it was ridiculous to celebrate spelling words anyone could just look up. In 7th grade, my science project on water purity in local streams earned state recognition. When the principal called to congratulate them, my mother responded as though she'd been told the forecast would be sunny. When I asked if they'd drive me 2 hours for the state competition, Dad scoffed. "Gas costs money. We're not wasting it so you can play scientist. That doesn't put food on the table." High school became my refuge. Clubs, libraries, teachers who believed in me, those were the places I could breathe. Mr. Alcott, my English teacher, lent me books from his personal collection, urging me not to let anyone dim my light. Miss Rivera, my math teacher, stayed late to help me with advanced exams. They were the family I wished I had. But when I became valedictorian, the principal personally invited my parents to the ceremony. They didn't come. Dad had a fishing trip with Damon. Mom claimed a migraine. I gave my speech to strangers, clutching back tears, until Mr. Alcott placed a journal in my hands, its inscription etched into my heart: "The world needs your voice." That night I promised myself I would escape. My escape plan became education. Every rejection from my family was kindling for the fire in my chest. Every sneer and dismissal cemented my resolve. I applied for scholarships in secret. With no internet at home, I used school computers. I created a hidden email account, begged a teacher to serve as my mailing contact. My classmates had family support banners, congratulations. I had floorboards in my room where I hid acceptance letters, pulling them out at night like treasure maps to freedom. Graduation day should have been triumphant, but it was stained by silence. As families celebrated, Dad asked me flatly, "So you start at the plant next week?" When I finally revealed my full scholarship to Westfield University, the silence was suffocating. Then Dad's rage erupted. He hurled a plate against the wall. "So you think you're better than us? Too good for real work. Books don't feed people." My mother stared at her lap. Damon laughed. "Always knew you were strange." That night I packed my things into a suitcase. With every shirt folded, every book placed, I felt the severing of roots that had never truly nourished me. I stepped into the unknown terrified but free. College was another world. I arrived alone by bus with a single suitcase while my roommate unpacked with her parents' help. Her father installed a mini fridge. Her mother fussed over sheets. When she asked if my parents were coming later, I lied. They had to work. That was the first of many lies I would tell. The truth, that my family considered me a disgrace, was too heavy to share. The first semester nearly broke me. I had no laptop, so I lived in the computer lab. My scholarship covered the basics, but nothing extra. I worked in the cafeteria, then took a second job at a diner. Exhaustion clung to me like a second skin, but I clung back harder. When I got sick with strep throat, the medical bills destroyed my fragile budget. Desperate, I called home. My mother's voice was cold, cautious. "Are you finally ready to give up?" "I just need $100, I said softly. "I'll pay it back when I get my paycheck." Dad grabbed the phone. "Money problems already? Welcome to the real world, college girl." Then he hung up. That night I slept in my car for the first time. For 2 weeks, I rotated between the backseat of my Honda and the library couches. I showered in the gym. Nobody noticed. I became invisible. By Thanksgiving, while classmates went home, I worked double shifts at the diner. The tips and extra pay allowed me to move into a dingy studio off campus. It wasn't safe, but it was mine. And despite everything, I excelled. Professors noticed. Dr. Lambert, my psychology professor, asked me to stay after class. "Selena, your analysis shows remarkable insight. Have you thought about majoring in psychology?" It was the first time I realized my pain could be more than survival. It could be understanding. Studying family dynamics, resilience, and trauma wasn't just academic. It was personal. It was healing. By my junior year, I was thriving academically but running on fumes physically. I worked 3 jobs: classes, research, and the diner. Meals came from free events and ramen packets. Still, my professors believed in me. Dr. Harrington selected me for a research assistantship, telling me, "You see things others your age can't. You understand not just theories but reality." If only he knew. Senior year, I specialized in how family environments impact education and development. The irony was painful. My family, the ones who tried to extinguish my ambition, had become the very reason for my academic success. I graduated with honors, glowing recommendations, and acceptance into graduate school with a teaching assistantship. In a rare moment of hope, I called home to share the news. "Full funding," I said. "I'll be teaching, researching." Mom interrupted with a sigh. "So more school. When will you get a real job, Selena?" Dad's voice cut in from the background. "Perpetual student. Still avoiding responsibility." Damon was supporting himself at 16. The call ended quickly, leaving me hollow. Still, I clung to my professor's faith. I moved near campus, calculating every cent, telling myself I could handle it. But when my car broke down, I made a decision I would come to regret. I moved back home. Just for a few months, I told myself. Just until I saved enough. What I didn't know was that stepping back into that house would ignite a chain of events that would nearly destroy everything. Returning home after years away felt like walking back into a cage I had once broken free from. The house looked smaller, the walls tighter, the air heavier. My old room had been reduced to a cluttered storage space, boxes stacked against the peeling wallpaper. I cleared a corner, setting up a small desk with my laptop. My lifeline, my world. At first, things seemed tolerable. My mother left food in the fridge with my name scrawled on sticky notes. My father muttered about career students, but kept his distance. I convinced myself this was manageable. I would focus on my thesis, save money for a car, and leave again before the poison seeped too deep. But the peace was fragile. My father couldn't resist jabs. "Staring at a screen all day isn't work," he'd bark, cranking the television volume to drown out my typing. My mother would echo his bitterness, adding, "Your father just wants what's best. Maybe you should think about a simpler job." Simpler. The word was a dagger. For me, simple meant chains. Damon began showing up unannounced. He'd swagger into my room, glance at my laptop, and sneer, "Still pretending to be a genius?" He loved to remind me of family obligations, the chores I'd supposedly neglected. Every interruption cost me precious focus. I adapted by working through the night when the house slept, my body crumbling under the strain of exhaustion. Yet even as my health faltered, my determination hardened. Every obstacle, every taunt, every glare from across the dinner table only fueled my resolve. I would finish my thesis. I would prove them wrong. But what I didn't realize was that my fight for knowledge wasn't just against deadlines. It was against my family's desperate need to keep me small. 6 weeks before my thesis was due, my advisor, Dr. Westfield, returned my draft covered in red ink. "Selena, your analysis is strong," she said gently, "but you need to restructure. The theoretical connections are there. You just haven't drawn them clearly enough." It felt like being pushed underwater after barely reaching the surface. I had to rewrite entire sections, rebuild arguments I thought were solid. Around the same time, my backup drive corrupted, erasing weeks of statistical work. I spent days reconstructing everything from scattered notes, my brain running on caffeine and panic. Meanwhile, home life deteriorated. My father seemed to sense my mounting pressure and fed on it. He'd walk into the dining room, glance at my laptop and sneer. "Typing isn't work. Carrying steel beams in the heat, that's work." He'd then blast the television so loudly the walls shook. My mother, as always, sided with him under the guise of peacekeeping. "He only wants you to eat. You can take a break. The thesis will still be there tomorrow." She didn't understand or refused to. Tomorrow meant failure. Tomorrow meant everything I'd fought for would crumble. One night I overheard them in the kitchen. My father's voice was sharp, contemptuous. "What good is all this education? She's 24, still living here, still playing student. Damon had his own place at 19. My mother's voice followed, resigned and dismissive. "I worried you. All these books but no husband, no children. Just paper no one will read." Their words hollowed me out. Yet they also lit a fire so fierce I worked 20 straight hours, reconstructing analyses through blurred vision. My thesis was nearing completion, 90% finished. I told myself I was almost free. But freedom in that house was never granted. It had to be stolen. 2 days before my deadline, exhaustion clung to me like chains. I worked from the dining table, papers spread across the surface like battle plans. My father lurked, slamming cabinets, pacing with exaggerated steps, inventing reasons to interrupt me. My mother hovered, dusting non-existent specks, reminding me of chores, insisting family meals were more important than school projects. By morning I was down to formatting and proofreading. My thesis was nearly perfect, the culmination of 2 years of labor. I felt pride, fragile but real. Then my father appeared earlier than usual, a coffee mug in hand, his gaze narrowing at the sight of my organized chaos. "Still playing student?" he said, voice dripping with disdain. "Normal people are at work by now." I tried to stay calm. "This is my work, Dad. I'll be done in a few hours." "Submission." He snorted. "Fancy word for homework. When I was your age, I was supporting a family." My mother chimed in, pressing her hand into my shoulder. "Surely you can take a break for breakfast." "Not today. Not when everything was at stake." "I'll eat later," I said, my voice strained. His face darkened. "Ungrateful. That's what education does. It makes kids think they're too good for family." Mom's attempt at soothing fell flat. Dad slammed his mug down, hot coffee splashing. "She's 23 and still playing with school projects while real adults work." I clenched my jaw, focusing on the screen. Every word, every keystroke mattered more than their rage. But their presence pressed against me like a tightening noose, their voices blurring into background noise that I couldn't shut out. And then, just as I reached the final pages, Damon arrived, his entrance loud and disruptive. "Family breakfast," he shouted. "Oh, still working on that homework?" I gripped the keyboard tighter. They weren't going to win. Not this time. The morning dissolved into a storm of sabotage. My father raised the television volume in increments until the walls vibrated. My mother hovered at my elbow, demanding attention for trivial tasks. Damon staged phone calls behind my chair, laughing loudly, his words pointed. "Supervisor now, full benefits. That's real success." Every jab landed like a blow, but I refused to crumble. By 11:30 I was almost done. Citations verified, abstract polished, everything ready for submission. Victory shimmered within reach. Then disaster struck. My screen froze. A blinking message appeared. "No internet connection." Panic surged. I checked my phone. No service. My pulse thundered. Less than 30 minutes until the noon deadline. I stumbled to the living room where my father sat watching television. Connected. The Wi-Fi worked for him. My voice shook. The internet's down in the dining room. I needed to submit my thesis. Please reset the router. He didn't look away from the screen. Works fine for me. Please, Dad. This is critical. My deadline is at noon. Slowly he turned his head, eyes glinting. Funny how these emergencies always come up with your school nonsense. Never seems to be a problem when your mother needs help. Realization hit like ice in my veins. He had done something. Did you block it? I demanded, trembling. A smile tugged at his lips. My house. My rules. Maybe I don't want the dining room to be a computer zone anymore. 18 months of work, teetering on the edge of ruin because of his pride. Rage and desperation collided inside me. This is my future, I whispered. He laughed, bitter and hollow. Future? That's a joke. Then he stood, his shadow falling over me. The moment hangs in my memory like shattered glass suspended in air, sharp, frozen, impossible to forget. His eyes locked on me not as a father but as a man undone by his own fury. You think you're better than us? He growled, stepping closer. Damon has a house, a promotion, a real life. Just papers nobody will ever read. My mother appeared in the doorway, silent, her presence an accomplice. I tried to reach the router to salvage my deadline, but his hand clamped around my arm, bruising. You don't touch anything in my house without permission. Let me go, I hissed, yanking free. This is insane. I just need 5 minutes. His sneer twisted deeper. Your education is nothing but an excuse to avoid responsibility. Makes you think you're better than us. For the first time, clarity burned through my fear. This has never been about my education, I said, voice steady despite the trembling in my body. This has always been about your insecurity. His expression snapped into something darker, more dangerous. Ungrateful little. No, I cut him off, the forbidden sin in our house, interruption. I am ambitious. I am determined. And I will not let you sabotage me. I turned to grab my laptop, prepared to flee to campus, deadline or not. His footsteps thundered behind me. You need to learn respect, he hissed. You need to learn your place. My place is not here, I said. The truth rang in the air like a bell. And then in one terrifying instant restraint shattered. His hand seized the laptop from my grasp. For a split second I thought he'd just hide it. But then he raised it high, eyes blazing. The next moment steel met flesh. The laptop crashed against my skull. The world tilted. And everything went dark. The blow exploded through my skull like a gunshot, white-hot pain radiating across my vision. I staggered backward, colliding with the wall, my knees buckling beneath me. Blood trickled down from the gash just above my temple, dripping into my eye, blurring the world into red streaks. My laptop, my lifeline, my future, lay in pieces on the floor, the screen dangling by a single wire from the shattered keyboard. 18 months of work reduced to silent plastic and sparks. My father stood over me, chest heaving, his face carved in rage. You don't deserve a future, he spat. You're a leech. And then came the most haunting sound of all, my mother's laughter. High-pitched, nervous, almost gleeful. She didn't cry out. She didn't rush to help. She stood in the doorway like a spectator at a show, giggling as if he had just told an off-color joke. Enough now, she finally said, though her voice was still laced with laughter. Enough. As if my blood, my broken laptop, and my shattered world were nothing more than spilled milk. My father muttered, "Clean yourself up. And clean this mess too." Then he walked away, his shadow trailing out of the room. My mother followed him, their voices casual, drifting into the kitchen, the clink of mugs, the hiss of a coffee pot, as though nothing extraordinary had happened. I stayed on the floor, dazed and trembling. Pain pulsed through my skull, nausea twisting my stomach. I pressed shaking fingers to my temple and they came away bright red. The sight jarred me awake. This wasn't just abuse. This was violence, cold and deliberate. But even through the pain, one thought overpowered everything else. My thesis. I have to save my work. I stumbled into the bathroom, clutching a washcloth to my head. The mirror showed me a stranger. Blood running down my cheek and eye already swelling, pale skin beneath trembling hands. The gash was deep. Stitches would be needed. Concussion symptoms rolled over me. Dizziness, nausea, light stabbing into my vision. But I couldn't think about hospitals. I couldn't think about anything except that deadline. When I returned to the dining room, Damon sat at the table, scrolling on his phone, unconcerned. He didn't look up until I crossed the room. "Dad really got you good," he said with a smirk. "Should have known better than to talk back." His casual cruelty chilled me more than the blood soaking my washcloth. This was normal for them. Violence was family language, accepted, excused, even laughed at. "I need your laptop," I said, desperation raw in my voice. "Please, Damon, I just need to submit my thesis. It's everything I've worked for." He finally glanced up, his shrug dismissive. "Didn't bring it. Besides, that thing's toast." He gestured to my shattered laptop. "You're not getting anything off it." His indifference pressed down like a weight, but still I clung to hope. Maybe I could salvage the hard drive, maybe I could get to campus. My phone buzzed. A new email from Dr. Westfield. "Selena, the noon deadline is approaching. Please confirm submission status." I looked at the clock. 11 o'clock. Less than an hour. My stomach dropped. My mother appeared in the doorway, her eyes cold, her tone scolding. "Where do you think you're going?" "To the hospital," I said. "And to campus." Her lips pursed. "Your father is still upset. Maybe you should wait. Apologize. Stop being dramatic." Apologize? For having my skull split open? For 18 months of work lying in pieces? Her suggestion was so absurd it momentarily stole my words. But then clarity sharpened. "I can't stay here another second." "Enough," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I'm leaving and I'm not coming back." My mother's eyes hardened. "If you walk out that door, don't expect this family to forgive you. You'll regret choosing books over blood." Her words sliced, but they no longer anchored me. Blood might be thicker than water, but not when it's spilled by the very hands that claim to love you. My father's voice thundered from the living room. "Ungrateful children don't get second chances here. You walk out, you're dead to me." I clutched my bag and the shattered remains of my laptop against my chest, blood still dripping down my face. My legs carried me forward, past my mother's glare, through the front door into the blinding daylight. The dizziness hit me hard once I reached my car. My vision blurred, my thoughts scattered. The deadline ticked closer, my body screaming for rest, for care. But I started the engine anyway. I couldn't collapse here, not in the house that had become a graveyard for my dreams. I drove without direction, every bump sending pain ricocheting through my skull. Finally, I pulled into Riverside Park under the shade of an oak tree. Alone in the car, the dam broke. Sobs tore from me, violent and unrestrained. I cried for the child whose victories were ignored. For the teenager who hid acceptance letters under the floorboards. For the graduate student whose own father destroyed her future with a single act of violence. Then came another buzz. My phone. "Selena, deadline at noon. Please confirm submission." It was 11:52. 8 minutes left. I was bleeding, my laptop dead, my thesis locked inside. Hopelessness swallowed me whole. But beneath it something stirred, that old, relentless resilience. I had fought impossible battles before. Maybe, just maybe, I could fight this one too. I pressed a tissue from my glove compartment against my wound, wiped my eyes, and typed a desperate reply to Dr. Westfield. "Emergency. Heading to campus. Laptop destroyed. Possible late submission. Please advise." Her response came instantly. "What kind of emergency? Are you safe?" For a moment I hesitated. Telling the truth felt like peeling off my own skin. But lies had protected me for too long. So I wrote the truth. Physical injury. Assault. Laptop destroyed. Will explain in person. The reply was swift and firm. "Go to University Health Services immediately. I'll meet you there. Don't worry about the thesis right now." Tears blurred my vision again, not of despair this time but of relief. For the first time in years, someone's instinct wasn't to mock, dismiss, or condemn me. It was to protect. I drove carefully, nausea twisting with every turn. At the health center, blood had soaked through the tissue, streaking my cheek. The receptionist took one look at me and hurried me into a room. A nurse named Linda, with gentle hands and steady eyes, cleaned the wound. "What happened?" she asked softly. "My father," I whispered. "He smashed my laptop against my head." Her hands paused, then resumed with careful precision. "This injury is consistent with that," she said. "I'm going to document everything." The word document rattled through me. Proof. A record. Something undeniable. The doctor confirmed a concussion and stitched the gash above my temple. Linda spoke firmly, "Your health comes first. Academic deadlines can be extended in emergencies. We'll get you through this." For the first time I felt the tide turning. The same family that tried to bury me had, without knowing, given me the proof I needed to rise. As I lay on the hospital bed, my body aching and my head pounding with every beat of my heart, Dr. Westfield appeared in the doorway. Her eyes widened when she saw me, bandaged, pale, trembling. "Selena," she whispered, her voice breaking, "what did they do to you?" Shame flooded me, but I forced myself to answer. "My father. He destroyed my laptop. My thesis was on it." Her expression shifted from horror to resolve. "Listen to me. The university has protocols for this. We'll get you an extension. We'll recover your files if possible. This isn't the end." Her certainty was like a rope thrown into quicksand. I clung to it. Later, as I sat in a quiet corner of the waiting room, I thought of my mother's laughter, my father's rage, Damon's indifference. For years, I had mistaken their cruelty for normalcy, convinced myself their rejection was my fault. But now, with blood still drying on my skin, I saw the truth with startling clarity. Their abuse had never been about me. It had been about their fear of what I represented, of what they could never control. They had smashed my tools, mocked my dreams, and tried to reduce me to silence. But even as my laptop lay in ruins, my voice remained. My mind remained. And for the first time I realized I was not powerless. That day in the hospital didn't just mark the loss of my thesis. It marked the rebirth of something far more powerful. The certainty that I would never again beg for their acceptance. My family had tried to erase me. Instead, they had given me my story. The examination room smelled faintly of antiseptic and paper gowns. While the doctor checked my pupils and asked me to follow his finger, I tried not to flinch at the sting of saline around the cut. He spoke in the measured cadence of someone used to crisis. "Mild concussion for stitches, rest, no screens for 48 hours, come back if the nausea worsens." The words rang practical, almost ordinary, as if any of this could be ordinary. When he stepped out, my advisor slipped in. "Selena," Dr. Westfield said, and my name in her voice undid me. I told her, haltingly at first, then with a clarity that startled us both, about the internet being cut, his hand on my arm, the raised laptop, the laughter from the doorway. She didn't interrupt. She only listened, shoulders squared, eyes bright with the kind of fury that stands up straight. "We'll handle the academic side," she said. "You sent me a draft 2 days ago. We have that version. I'll contact the graduate chair about an emergency extension and loop in IT for data recovery. But we also need to handle the harm. The campus police office is next door. Would you be willing to document what happened?" The question landed like a crossroads. Reporting meant naming it. Naming it meant stepping out of the fog I'd lived in since childhood. I nodded. Yes. The word felt like striking a match. Everything moved quickly after that. A campus officer photographed the wound and the split machine, recorded my statement, and explained protective order options in calm, precise language. Student services arranged emergency housing, keys placed into my palm with quiet efficiency, and a loaner laptop if I needed it. An IT tech came to collect the wreckage of mine, promising to try the drive. By the time the stitches were tied off and a bandage covered the ache, the day had shifted shape. The house I'd fled had been a universe where pain was normal and help was a myth. Here, help had a front desk, an extension number, and people who said "we" instead of "you." I felt shaky, small, and underneath it, braced by something I hadn't felt in years: safety. The emergency apartment was spare. A mattress, a desk, a humming mini-fridge, but to me it felt cathedral quiet. I set the loaner laptop on the table and stared at the dark screen, obeying the doctor's warning about no screens while my pulse still thudded in my head. On the kitchenette counter, the counseling center's card lay beside a paper cup of water. I dialed. The crisis counselor answered on the second ring. "This is Ava." Her voice was steady as a handrail. I told her what I could manage. The years of minimization, the way contempt had been our dialect, the mourning that had turned into a weapon. She didn't interrogate my choices. She offered anchors, grounding exercises, a plan for the night, permission to rest without earning it. When we ended the call, I slept for the first time that day, dreamless and heavy. Knocking woke me at mid-morning. An IT technician stood at the door holding a small external drive like a fragile bird. "Good news," he said. "Your hard drive survived. We cloned what we could." When he left, I stared at the device until my hands stopped shaking enough to plug it in. Concussion rules said no screens. Survival said finish. I chose survival with care. Lights low, brakes often, ice pack trading places with the bandage. The files open like a rescued language. There was my thesis, whole up to 2 days prior, debris scattered only across the final pages. I rebuilt them piece by piece, leaning on notes, emails, memory, fury. Late that afternoon, the portal page blinked its quiet invitation. I reviewed the references one last time, breathed until my chest loosened and clicked submit. A plain confirmation arrived. Submission received. 5 ordinary words and the room swam, not from dizziness this time, but from relief so raw it made me laugh and sob at once. When I finally picked up my phone again, I didn't call home. I called the university legal office. "I'd like to talk about a protective order," I said. My voice surprised me, soft, unwavering mine. Recovery came in increments, the way daylight steals back a room. Headaches dimmed from sirens to distant engines. The sutures dissolved to a thin, silvery seam. Twice a week I walked to the counseling center, where stories I'd kept duct-taped inside me were allowed to breathe. We traced the map backward. How jokes had been daggers, how loyalty had been demanded like tribute, how love had been performance graded against obedience. Naming each piece didn't re-break it. It loosened its hold. Academically, the path steadied. The graduate chair formalized a 2-week extension without a single raised eyebrow. My committee rescheduled the defense for a later date, with Dr. Westfield acting as a living shield for my timeline. IT sent me a tidy directory of recovered files. I sent a thank you that felt absurdly inadequate. The legal steps felt stranger because they made the private public. I sat in a small hearing room with a student advocate at my side and told an official what had been done to me. My parents didn't appear. Their lawyer sent a note claiming I had a history of exaggeration. The judge skimmed the medical report, the photos, the officer's record, and looked up with a small, tired shake of the head. The order was granted for the maximum term. The paper was thin, but holding it felt like gripping a spine I'd grown for myself. When the rescheduled defense finally arrived, I stood before the committee steadier than I expected to be. Questions came sharp and fair. I answered with what the last years had carved into me: precision, humility, refusal to flinch. When they asked about limitations, I named them. When they asked about implications, I named those too. How family systems swallow possibility, how resilience is not a trait but a coalition. "Congratulations," the chair said at last, smiling in a way that reached his eyes. "Pass with distinction." The words reverberated through my ribs. Outside, the quad's oaks were throwing lacework shadows across the path, students laughing under them as if the world had always been kind. I walked through that light and let it touch me. Summer thinned the campus to a quieter heartbeat. I moved from emergency housing into a small graduate apartment with a view of the library dome and a rent I could finally afford. A week later, an email from the department landed like a door opening. A research assistantship, stipend attached, campus housing secured for the year if I wanted it. Recommendation by Dr. Westfield. Project focus: educational resilience among first-generation students. Would I be interested? I answered yes before the end of the sentence. The work fit like a language I'd been learning my whole life. Interviews, design of instruments that asked the right questions without wounding, literature that threaded personal testimony with data. We weren't just measuring persistence. We were mapping the weather systems that batter it. I slept, ate, walked in the evenings. My days began to resemble a life. That's when Damon showed up. He hovered in my office doorway as if crossing an invisible border. The swagger was gone, replaced by something raw and uncertain. "Can we talk?" he asked. I didn't invite him to sit until I saw he wasn't performing. He stood anyway, hands jammed in his jacket pockets. "They told people you fell," he said, eyes fixed on a book spine. "Said you hit your head on the table. But I saw the laptop. I heard him. He swallowed. I should have stopped it." Anger surged, old and clean. Then it ebbed, leaving a coastline of grief I hadn't expected. "You didn't," I said. "That's the truth." He nodded, flinching. From his pocket he pulled a small box and set it on my desk. "I know it doesn't fix anything," he said, Inside was a new laptop. Sleek, far better than the second-hand one I'd lost. I wanted to replace what got broken. A replacement for a tool, not a history. Still, the gesture was a bridge laid plank by plank over water neither of us had asked to drown in. Thank you, I said carefully. There are boundaries now. With them. With you too, at least for a while. He nodded again. I get it. But I'd like to try to be better. It wasn't absolution. It was a beginning, which is a different kind of miracle. By fall, the research had a heartbeat of its own. We opened a small program for first-generation students navigating hostile or indifferent homes. Weekly groups, a mentorship network, a binder of practical scripts for conversations that so often detonated. I never disclosed my own scar story in those rooms, but the students recognized something in me anyway. That peculiar fluency in the weather of contempt. We taught strategies that were both soft and steel. How to set boundaries without turning yourself to stone, how to document who to call at 2 a.m., where to find a free meal on campus when pride says starve. We taught that resilience isn't grit alone. It's scaffolding. It's community. It's a we. Watching a student lift their chin when they said, no, to a parent for the first time felt like witnessing a constellation click on. In winter, an invitation arrived. Present our findings at a national conference on educational equity. I stood beneath chandelier light before a room of strangers and told the story in data, not in bruises. Correlations between parental derision and delayed degree completion, the measurable power of one believing adult, the outcomes when institutions step in where families fail. Persistence, I said, isn't an individual virtue. It's an ecological achievement. The applause was generous. Afterward, students and faculty threaded toward me with questions, then with thanks that weren't really for me but for the idea that none of us were alone. I walked back to my room through a city glittering with frost and realized I was no longer running from. I was walking toward. On my desk waited a message from the curriculum committee. Approved, pilot seminar on family systems and educational resilience, spring term. Instructor, Miss Ward. I stared at the subject line until it softened into meaning. Teaching. Not just surviving the story but shaping the language that might spare someone else its worst chapters. I smoothed the corner of the email with my thumb and thought of the girl who hid letters under floorboards, of the woman who bled on the dining room tile while laughter sounded like a verdict. The verdict had been wrong. My future wasn't a joke. It was a syllabus, a key, a door opening on a room filled with chairs, and one seat at the front with my name on it. The first day of my seminar arrived before I felt ready. I stood in an empty classroom early, arranging chairs in a circle so no one would have to face a row of backs. The whiteboard was clean. The syllabus copies were stacked on the desk like small flags planted on new ground. I rolled my sleeves up, caught the shimmer of my scar in the window's reflection, and traced it lightly with a fingertip, proof that I survived, not a signature of defeat. Students filtered in. A nursing major who worked nights. An engineering sophomore whose parents called college extended childhood. A literature student from a town like mine where the factory whistle still dictated the day. They came with careful faces and backpacks that sagged with more than books. I began with logistics, then shifted to what I wished someone had said to me years ago. You are not broken for struggling. You are navigating a system that wasn't built with your family in mind. We're going to build scaffolding together. A hand rose. A young man with ink on his fingers and a bruise that looked like sleep deprivation under each eye. What if your parents say you're selfish for being here? He asked. The question hit me with physical force. I steadied my voice. Then the word, selfish, is being used to keep you small, I said. We're going to learn to hear words and still choose what's true. After class, I stayed as students hovered with the kind of questions no syllabus answers. How to hide a savings account, how to talk to a pastor who said loans were sin, how to survive holidays without regressing into the child you fought to outgrow. I wrote down campus numbers. I promised to walk with them to offices if doors felt too heavy to open alone. As I packed up, my phone buzzed with a message from the legal office. A date to review an extension of the protective order, routine but necessary. My chest tightened, old reflex, but the fear didn't get the last word. I closed the lights, stepped into the corridor, and felt the hum of the building gather under my feet like a current I could finally trust. 2 weeks later, my lawyer forwarded a letter my parents' attorney had sent for the court's awareness. It was written in the oddly polished tone of someone laundering contempt through etiquette. They regretted misunderstandings. They wished me well. They framed the assault as a family disagreement, suggested I had a flair for dramatics, and lamented my influence by academic elites. I read it once, then again, feeling the old script tug at my sleeve. Maybe it wasn't that bad. Maybe I should soften the truth. I carried the letter to counseling instead. Ava listened, then asked the question that disarmed the fog. What happens to your body when you read it? I looked down. My shoulders had curled inward. My jaw ached from clenching. That's your answer, she said. I folded the letter back into its envelope and slid it into a drawer I didn't open again. News drifted in from Darnell. Small-town news moves like smoke through cracks. The mill cut a shift, then another. Friends said my father was angry all the time, angrier than usual. Someone mentioned he'd been sent home after a shouting match with a foreman. I felt the ache of pity brush the edge of my boundary and chose deliberately to let it pass. Empathy doesn't require proximity. Compassion doesn't cancel safety. On campus, the work deepened. A student came to class with red eyes and a tremor in her hands. Her uncle had told her if she stayed in school she'd be too good to marry. We drafted a plan. A small grant for a campus meal plan so she could stop depending on family dinners that came with lectures. A meeting with financial aid to reduce her hours. A script she could read from when calls turned cruel. She left with her spine a little straighter. That evening, as snow sifted down against the library glass, I wrote my own script in my journal. The one I'd use if manipulation came dressed as apology. I believe my memory. I honor my boundary. I choose my future. The words didn't erase the past. They lit the next step. Damon texted me a week before the review hearing. Can we meet? Public place. I won't bring them. I stared at the screen long enough to finish a mug of tea gone cold. Then I typed 1 hour. Noon. The diner on Maple. He was already there when I arrived, a stranger wearing my brother's posture. The waitress poured coffee for him, then for me, as if this too was a kind of ordinary. We sat with the clink of cutlery around us and the low radio murmur of a country song about leaving. I started seeing someone, he said without preface. A counselor through the union. I thought you should know. The words landed gently, like a bird choosing a safer branch. He looked older, or maybe it was the first time I'd seen him without our father's shadow thrown across his face. I'm not asking you to forgive anything, he added. I'm trying to stop being the echo. He told me pieces I suspected but had never heard from him. How Dad's father had made boys prove themselves with pain. How love had always been a ledger balanced in chores and silence. How Damon learned early that mocking me was the quickest way to earn approval. It felt like being on the right team, he said, swallowing. I didn't want to be small, so I helped make you smaller. There it was, the architecture of our house, named out loud. It doesn't excuse it, he said quickly. I know that. No, I agreed. But it explains the weather. He slid a folded page across the table. A list of meetings from a support group, dates circled. I thought you might tell students who need it, he said. It wasn't penance. It was usefulness. I could work with that. When we stood to leave, he hesitated, then asked, if I slip up, will you tell me? Not to take care of me. Just to be honest. I will be honest, I said. And I'll keep my boundaries. He nodded as if those two promises were the same language. Maybe for the first time in our lives they were. By spring, the seminar moved from theory into muscle memory. We practiced phone scripts out loud. I can't talk right now. I'll call you after my study session. Until the tremor left voices. We role-played holiday returns with exit plans tucked like spare keys in pockets. We taught the paperwork as survival skills. Disability accommodations for panic attacks. Emergency grants for students bounced out of family homes at midterms. The process for filing reports when Grace was gone and harm had a name. One afternoon, a first-year student named Kiana burst into my office, eyes glossy, hands empty. They threw my clothes on the porch, she said, words tumbling. They said if school means so much, let it feed you. I pulled the binder from the shelf, thumbed to the page I knew by heart, and we started building a bridge. Temporary housing request, statement for financial aid, email to professors asking for brief extensions. While we waited for confirmations, I made tea and handed her a granola bar from the secret stash I kept in my drawer. We sat in the quiet of paperwork and steam. The ping of an approved housing placement made us both exhale. Thank you, she whispered, voice breaking. I was sure this was the end. It's a bend, I said. Not an end. When she left with a key and a map and numbers saved in her phone, I closed my door and cried in the private way you do when something breaks open and heals at once. I thought of the park where I had folded myself around a bloody washcloth and a deadline that felt like a cliff. After office hours I drove there. The oak still threw its shade in the same wide circle. I stood under it and did a small defiant thing. I laughed. Not because anything was funny but because joy had survived. Back home I hung my framed degree above my desk, not as proof to the world, but as a letter to the girl who hid acceptance letters under floorboards. You were right to run. You were right to stay gone. Look what you built. The review hearing for the protective order lasted 12 minutes. The judge read the notes, glanced at the medical photos again, and signed the extension without fanfare. The law can't knit a family back together, but it can hold a line so healing has a chance to take root. I walked out into light that felt unremarkable and therefore perfect. A week later, the department chair asked if I'd consider turning the pilot seminar into a standing course and taking on an advising load for first-generation students. You have a way of making the invisible visible without making it feel like a diagnosis, he said. I thought of Mr. Alcott's inscription, "The world needs your voice," and of how long I'd spent trying to swallow it. Yes, I said. I'd be honored. On the first day of the expanded course, I arrived early again. The circle of chairs waited. I wrote on the whiteboard in block letters that took up more space than I was used to claiming. Resilience is a we. Students trickled in, carrying weather in their eyes. We started not with roll call but with a question. What did you survive to get here today? Answers came in whispers and then in sentences. A night shift, a screaming match, a car that only starts on the third try, a church that called ambition prideful. We wrote them down not to dwell but to witness. After class I walked across campus to the library, the dome shining like a coin in the sun. My phone vibrated, a text from Damon. Made it to week 4. Still going. I thumbed back the simplest reply. Proud of you. Keep going. Then I slipped the phone into my pocket and let the quiet hold me. There is a version of my life where I quit the day the laptop met bone. There is a version where the letter in the lawyer's envelope rewrites memory, where pity drags me back across a boundary meant to save me. I'm not living those versions. I am living this one. A class full of chairs in a room with a door I unlock. A campus map memorized for students who need it at midnight. A scar that fades but refuses to lie. I do not owe my family my future. I owe my future the truth. And the truth is this. What they tried to shatter I made into a window. What they called selfish I call free. What they named a joke I stand in front of a room and teach like gospel. Your worth is not up for debate. Your voice belongs to you. And when the wind rises you don't weather it alone.